So we got a great episode for you today. I got to visit with Drake Deerman, who is a great guy and a heck of a deer hunter down in Alabama. And we talked about a lot of things, but the biggest part of our conversation was this story around this 166 buck that he killed up in Kentucky. He's a public land hunter, and it's an amazing story because he went to this area that he had scouted, picked it out on an e-scout, gone up there, checked it out a couple times ahead of time. But we went in there in September, early September this year, there was a ton of hunters. It was a spot that he thought was going to be overlooked. He got in there. It was highly pressured, over 50 trucks when he first rolled in there. And the deer that he had scouted preseason, that he had been picking up on camera, he had this deer in a pattern that he thought was very killable. And that deer disappeared with the pressure. And Drake pivoted, completely changed his approach, and ended up taking down the biggest buck of his career. It's an amazing story. Drake's a great guy, a heck of a deer hunter, and somebody that I'm really looking forward to developing a friendship with over time. He goes into great detail on everything on this story, from what happened when that buck disappeared to how he pivoted, what his scouting looked like in real time, and how he located a new buck to hunt, and then what his process was for hunting that buck and ultimately harvesting that buck after 9 long days in the field, sleeping in his truck. Man, this is a heck of a story. You're not going to want to miss it. Thanks for being here. If you like it, subscribe over on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. We're everywhere, having a good time, talking to great people, learning more about hunting. Thanks for being here. Enjoy. All right, so we're here with Drake Deerman. Hey, I appreciate you being here today, brother.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and the fact that your last name is Deerman is like, we were talking about this before we started, but I was like, is that really your last name? I was like, I thought it was a handle, and you're like, no, that's my last name.
No, it says it on my driver's license.
Yeah, that's right. Now, you're also a member of Team Osseo, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I started doing some stuff with them about January, just doing shows with them, and kind of on their pro staff thing kind of.
Yeah.
But I think I did 9 shows with them this year, and I got to know Joe. And I met Rendell Eric on a piece of public land in Missouri, and in a parking lot. We were camping, and he pulled up beside us, sleeping in his truck. So we spent about 4 or 5 days together and just got to know each other. And when he started working with Osseo, he asked me to come start doing some stuff with him. So it's just kind of going from there.
So your deal is you're a public land guy, right? And you basically you move around and you hunt the whole Southeast, the Midwest. And you met Rendell, who's a towering dude, in a parking lot somewhere in Missouri. What without giving stuff away, but what part of Missouri were you in? Like the northwest corner, or where?
Yeah, I was in the northern part, kind of west. It towards he lives in Iowa, and that place wasn't crazy far from Iowa, and he hunts that place some too. So
yeah, my wife's family's from Missouri, and my family's from Southern Illinois. So that's where, like, I go up to Southern Illinois and usually hunt there for a week.
Yeah.
Sometime around early to mid-November every year, and then I'll usually bump over. And I didn't hunt Missouri last year just because I didn't have time, but I've got family that's got some land over there that I'm going to go scout, and I'll probably start hunting that next year. But that Missouri is a great deer state.
Yeah, it is. You can see 3 deer on the wall right now behind me from Missouri. So it's a really good state.
So I think that's that you've got a nice spot in Missouri that you like.
Yes and no. I mean, I've hunted Missouri for a while. I mean, we've got pretty much like 4 pieces of public, and they're not anywhere close to each other, that we just kind of bounce around. Some in the northeast state, some in the northwest corner, some in central Missouri. So we bounce around Missouri pretty good.
So the thing that made me pick up send you a message was you put a post on Instagram a few weeks ago about this deer that you killed in Kentucky. And the post is, I'm just going to read from it real quick because I think it's worth going through. You said words can't truly describe the roller coaster of emotions that led to harvesting and putting my hands on this deer. This is the part that is really interesting to me. 9 days sleeping in my truck, losing my number one shooter, which would have been the biggest deer of my life, leading to a 4-day search for him that turned out to nothing. I decided to start over, drop everything I knew about this property, and start completely fresh searching for a new deer, which that by itself is insane to me. But you're getting after it. Hardest pressured public land I've ever hunted, and after 2 days of daylight to dark, relentless searching, I found this buck. 2 more days of watching him, having him within bow range twice with no shot opportunity, then passing on his running buddy 3 times, which would have been the biggest buck of my life. All came down to a 64-yard shot when he stood up out of his bed. Hardest hunt I've ever been on, hardest earned deer I've ever killed. So tell this, like, I want to hear all the details of this story, because this is one of those ones that, like, I've read a lot of them, and this is one that sounds like it's for the book. So tell me where this thing, obviously don't give your spot away, but kind of give some background to, had you scouted this place? Was it new to you? Like, how did the whole thing start in terms of the way that you got into hunting this first deer that you didn't end up killing that put you on the other one?
So this place, I've never been to it before until March. I picked it out on a map. I knew the genetics in the area. I knew it's set up to be able to hold, I knew there should be some good deer on it just based on the habitat and the way it lays out. Like I do with anything that I plan on hunting, in March, I took off and went up there, scouted it, found some really good buck sign, found a pretty good shed, and ended up coming back in July to get some cameras out and do some glassing around some of those areas where I found some of that good sign. And I found some really big sign around a field, but the way it's set up, I knew, closer, like in the summertime, I knew that he would probably live around that field. And it was corn this year. And so I parked my truck and in July and just glassed, and I saw him come out pretty much exactly where the sign was coming from. And I mean, he was, at that point, all the attention was on that deer. And I went and got.
So what made you, before you went, so as you were, obviously, like a lot of time in this, we'll see deer in the summer, right? We'll summer scout deer, but then they'll kind of disappear in September. So when did the season start in the state that you were hunting? September 1st? Because I know you shot him on what, September the 9th or something like that?
I shot him on September 11th. It opened the 7th.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, so you had relative confidence that he was still going to be there, though?
Yeah, I did. Just based off of, what I guess I've seen. Normally, if a deer has everything that he needs in a place like that, especially when it's standing corn, they will stay, through mid-September or until they start, that testosterone really starts rising and they start getting into, wanting to make their rounds and hitting scrapes and acorns are dropping. And that's really kind of when I feel like they branch out and start doing different stuff. I knew there was a chance he could leave, but I also knew, if I could kill him early, he should be there because he had everything in that place.
And how much time had you, because obviously this ended up being a pretty long, adventure. How much time had you allotted to be able to be up there? Like, had you originally planned to be up there that long, or had you given yourself a few days and it kind of turned into something that you hadn't planned on it turning into?
I gave myself till September 20th. I went up there on the 3rd to glass and try to get eyes on the deer because I like to watch them. And when I go in for a kill, I like to know that it's going down. Or obviously not like no, but know that there's a really good chance. And he had been daylighting pretty regular. He was showing up regular. And I wanted to be able to get eyes on him and watch what he was doing to, make sure when I go in where I didn't need to go, what I needed to, just have all the fine details.
And so, what was the? This was the first one. This was the one that you didn't end up shooting. But so, tell me a little bit about this deer. What was this? You know, you're scouting him. You saw him. He was obviously worth going back up there after. What did this deer look like? What was he at size wise? How did his body look like? What was it about him that had you going after him?
I'm not gonna give too many details because he's still alive.
Oh, okay, all right.
But he was like 100 and well over 170.
He's a hammer.
He was a big deer.
Okay, gotcha.
And
All right.
yeah, he was a giant.
Okay. So you're pretty. He's daylighting. You feel good about, like you said, you're not just kind of wandering in there hoping he's going to show up. You felt pretty good about him being there. So take it from there.
So
You scouted him.
yes,
You're up there glassing, and then the season opens.
Well, I never got eyes on him. So he showed up for the last time 2 days before I went up there, which it was normal. He had a loop that he would make, and where I was hunting him was part of that loop. But when he was within that loop in the place where I was planning on hunting him, he did not have a problem showing up in the daylight. And he would be gone for anywhere between 4 days to like a week. And then he would come and be in that area for like 3 or 4 days. And then he'd go and then he'd come. And I felt like I had dialed in on what caused him to be there when he was. I mean, it was, and I haven't experienced this a lot, but it was pretty wind based. That's the first deer I've really ever seen that's just truly, truly wind based, but he was.
So he would basically just he would only go into that area on a certain wind.
Yes.
And so how are you? Just out of curiosity, how are you like? So you've got him cycling through there at a certain day interval. He's only going in on a certain wind. Like, how are you tracking that to pick those trends up? To kind of recognize, you know, okay, it's certain days, it's a certain wind. What's your process for keeping track of that stuff?
Okay, so you know how the wind works or how weather works. I mean, it works kind of clockwise. The day that it would start getting ready to be a western wind, and it was a west wind, he would show up, and literally throughout the time that it stayed a west wind, he would be there. Just be there. And as soon as it would switch over and start getting out of like any other direction, he was gone.
He's gone.
And I mean, it was okay. I mean, I watched him for 2 months do that, and it was the same. So it was the same every
distinct pattern. So you felt good about it. So what was the wind pattern doing? You're up there. So you said he disappeared 2 days before the season opened. Is that right?
Yes. It was a western wind when he was there. Not before the season opened. Before I got there, I got there 3 or 4 days early.
Okay.
And it switched over. So I was expecting to be there, but I wasn't really expecting to be like right there, But I could get up and see a lot. And it ended up when that next west wind hit and he wasn't there, I was like, oh crap. Because his running buddy wasn't showing up either. And so finally, once the season actually came in and I couldn't get eyes on him or he wasn't showing up on camera, I mean, it was like he vanished. I went in there and decided to scout it out. And now this place also opening day had like 50 trucks on it. And it's not, I mean, like in the general area of where I was at. I mean, it was absolutely insane. I eased in there to, kind of easily scout, not go in there and just bust through stuff. And man, there were cameras and stands and everything all over. I thought this would kind of be a little bit of an overlooked place. It wasn't. The deer got busted out.
Yeah. Super pressured.
Yeah. So I was up there for, I guess it was 2 or 3 days actually before the season. And then during the season, I looked for him for like 3 more days. And I could be wrong exactly because I can't remember exactly how many days each thing was at this point. But I mean, there were 4 or 5 days where I was just looking, and I mean, he was nowhere. I started scouting, you know, within pretty much a mile of where he was. I was like, okay, anything that he could go to, anything that he could go to, and it was just, I mean, showed up nothing. I mean, I wound up finding a lot of other, deer and stuff, not exactly shooters, but deer that I had no idea were there. Uh, as I was looking, but he was just nowhere to be found. Uh, and finally, like day 4 or 5 of me being there and fighting this deer and messing around that standing corn and everything else, I finally just and I ended up finding his running buddy. And this was kind of the point when I was like, okay, I'm going to have to do something different, because I found his running buddy and he was no longer with him. And I had him, 3 days in a row, showing up on cameras. And he actually, when I was hunting, I had him at like 100 yards. Now it was through standing corn, so I never laid eyes on him. But when I got on that deer and he wasn't with him, and I knew he was gone. I mean, a pretty good ways away, and I was finally kind of like, if I don't start over and start doing something different, I'm just going to spend this whole trip looking for a ghost. So that's kind of when
Yeah.
I decided to just start fresh.
So at this point, you're 4 or 5 days in. How long have you been up there at this point?
I believe that was my 5th day up there when I kind of made that
Okay.
decision.
And in terms of you said there was like just a ton of trucks in there. How did the pressure stay like that the entire time, or was it like that the first couple of days and then let off a little bit?
The first few days of season, it was like that. I would say the first like 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then it kind of let up. It got better. There were still guys hunting it, but the deer were just pushed. Like, the reason I kind of dropped everything that I felt like I knew was because everything that I had an idea of was over. I mean, those deer were pushed into hideout.
Yeah.
The big deer were, especially.
Yeah. So you decide to start over. Tell me what that looks like.
Man, I'll be honest with you. What I did, the only thing I brought to Kentucky with me was my hunting stuff and my Bible. And I was
Mm-hmm.
not, from the day I left, I was off social media. I was off everything. Literally just me, God, and the deer is all I wanted, because life's kind of hectic back here. I run my own business, and I just wanted to get away and not have anything else on my mind. So I left the property when I made the executive decision that I got to do something different. And man, I just parked my truck and read my Bible and prayed and spent about 3 hours doing anything but thinking about deer. And just kind of let loose, because I'd been stressed out. I'd been, worked up about that. And finally, when I felt like I kind of got my mind off of it and was ready to, make a new game plan, I sat down and I started thinking about where everybody had been, what, they hadn't been going into, and maybe some bedding areas that were overlooked. So what I did is I come up with I guess kind of a game plan. It was a 5-day game plan to find a new shooter. And what I was going to do, I picked out 5 bedding areas, and I was going to kind of get off of as much boots on the ground scouting type of stuff, because I felt like I knew what they were wanting to be in at that point. And
those bedding areas, you had just found those from moving around looking for the other deer, essentially, or were these that you located on Onyx or something, or just through?
I would say some from that e-scouting, and some from being where seeing where people were going and weren't going.
Gotcha.
And just scouting around that other deer. I'd say 50-50. Seeing what all the guys were doing around me kind of gave me an idea of what to do in the whole area.
You're just basically looking for a hole where they weren't going.
Yes.
That also would hold deer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at lunch each day, I was going to hang a stand and watch from pretty much lunch till dark. Go in the next morning and watch till 9 or 10 o'clock. Pull the set down. Maybe scout a little bit, but then be in the next place in glass. Same deal. lunch till dark, daylight till lunch till dark, daylight till lunch.
And so when you say glass, you're not glassing from your truck, like trying to glass, fields for entry and exit points.
No,
You're going into
I'm
a
getting
bedding area or an area where you think,
yeah.
and you're hanging a stand and glassing from there.
Yeah, I'm getting on the
internally.
edges of bedding areas, and I was actually
Mm-hmm.
trying to get, in that 30-foot range up a tree where I could see down in stuff, and
Gotcha.
just trying to find a big deer stand up is what I was doing. I wasn't worried about where they were eating. I wasn't worried because it was all nighttime activity at that point. I needed to know where a deer was laying down, because it was to a point where there was no point in figuring out where they were eating because that wasn't telling you anything. You need to know where they're spending the daytime. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to just kind of cut right to that.
And with that in mind, what was your thought process when you found that you thought that was going to be, and this is just me, because obviously, like I said, I just started doing this a couple of years ago. So I'm a big part of why I started doing this podcast was to learn from people. So when you're doing this, is there a thought process around, okay, if I can find where it's spending its time during the day, were you thinking you're going to go in and kill it coming back at night? Or were you thinking you were going to get in there and do a morning sit? Like, what was your thought around that in terms of once you found one, the best way to kill it?
Pretty much it was going to be situational. I try to keep a pretty open mind, especially in a situation like that where there's so much going on. I guess my goal was to just get eyes on one in a place where I could watch him a couple times and see what he was doing, and then make a move, I guess, just based off my best judgment from there.
Gotcha.
Because, I mean, the places that they were pushed into was kind of crazy because anywhere where there was trees, literally anywhere where there were trees, even if it's a 10-acre block of woods, there were going to be 5 or 6 or 7 cameras in it. So they were pushed into open, thick stuff like CRP top, just thick, tall, anything that was head high grass.
Yeah. Okay.
So
so you were getting up, basically picking trees on field edges and trying to look down into that stuff.
Yes. And, I mean, really, I was really just looking for a big deer and trying to find some kind of pattern on him. And if I could find a pattern on him, some kind of, weakness in that pattern, that's what I was going to shoot for. I mean, I knew there was a possibility, like, if I could catch one going 2 bed down, maybe doing some spot and stalk kind of stuff. But really my goal was to just get eyes on a shooter somewhere that he was consistent, and then just go from there.
So interested, the story that you told a little bit ago, which was, well, it was part of the story, but when you said you just kind of, you took some time, right? You spent some time with your Bible, you prayed about it. So I'm strong in my faith as well. It's another one of the things that I really liked about your story and some of the stuff that you say on there. So I just got back about a week and a half ago from a 7-day elk hunt out in Colorado. It was the first time I've done a Western hunt ever. I went right at the beginning. I heard one bugle in 7 days. Like I think I covered about 50 miles. And it was, same thing. I got to day 6 and I was very discouraged. It was, and I was talking to a lot of people in the area. They were all saying the same thing. I hadn't found anybody in the unit that had harvested. And I kind of did the same thing, on day 6. I took some time in the afternoon. I regrouped. The only thing I went out there with, same thing. I completely stayed off social media. I got up every morning, did my Bible study super early, got out before daylight, and I was out, calling and just trying to call one in. I called one in, and he came in silent the second day I was there, and he busted me. But other than that, it was a 7-day. I got skunked, and I needed that time. But on that Saturday, I kind of did the same thing. I took a few hours in the middle of the day, regrouped, prayed, spent a little time watching some college football, which was weird, but I just needed some time to get my brain off of elk. Yeah. And I did a good reset, and I hunted hunted hard the last day and a half. Didn't end up, I never got anything to come in. And as I talked to people, they said that week was just brutal, but I know where your head was at, man. Yeah. It can get to you. And the weird part is too, is we do it because we love it. right? It's something that brings us joy, but sometimes we can get so hyper focused on the outcome that we forget about how much we love the
Yeah.
process.
Yep. And that's the process is what it's all about. The process is what gets me going. Like I mean the scouting and the shed hunting and finding what they're doing, and like the game is what I love. But yes, in the middle of the game, when you're in the middle of the storm, man, it'll make
It
you
can
feel like
easy
you're
it
laying
gets,
on the
you get
ground
this.
getting your head kicked in from every direction. Uh,
Yeah,
I
I
got a
dude,
buddy
I
that's
I
going.
feel that.
I got a buddy that's going through that right now. I was actually on the phone with him this morning before he called, and that's exactly what we were talking about. Just, I mean, he's in the middle of, he's hunting some big deer, and been seeing them. And when you see them and you're around them, and they're doing everything right, and it feels like you're doing everything wrong, uh, makes you feel pretty bad. It's rough, but uh, sometimes you have those hunts. I've had a whole lot more hunts where I go home with nothing, and you just got to take it for what it's worth. It's a blessing to be able to do what we do, and whether you come home with something or not, we get to go out there and we have the health to be able to do it, and we get to go and do what we love and chase these awesome animals. And uh, I try to spend as much time with the Lord on every trip I take as I can, and I kind of lock in when I go on these trips, and when I'm in my stand not doing anything, trying to just pray and read my Bible, and just grow closer to Him. Because that at the end of the day, I'm not trying to harp on this, but that's you know my prayer through all of this is like whatever happens, if I ever manage to, like killing this deer and, people have seen it, whatever platform I ever have, that's, I want people to know that's the most important thing, because we take that last breath, it don't matter what we've killed it matters, you know, what we did for him and what we did for other people and how we treated and loved other people. And that's, that's way, way more important than any of this. Uh, but just fortunately he allows us to come out and do this, and whatever success we have, whatever success I have, I want to put that out there that it's not because of me. And
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I believe the same way that that hunt that I was able to go on out in Colorado. I actually just did it. I don't know if you know who Cliff Gray is.
oh
He's got a pretty good sized YouTube channel, but it's all Western. He used to own a Western guiding company, and he helped me do a debrief on my hunt. And that was, I've told this story before, so I'll keep it short, but I had 3 back surgeries a few years ago. I was at the point where I could hardly walk the end of the driveway. And, through God's grace and some really good people that I ran into and met, I was able to rehab through that. And that was my goal, was to get out and do that elk hunt. And last year was the first time I've ever hunted, but like I just found a majesty right in the woods that I had never really experienced before. And I've posted this a few times before, but my wife does this Bible study, and one of the days that she did it, she came back to me and she was like, we were talking about this thing in the Bible study, and it was talking about like, where's your God place, right? Where do you feel closest to the Lord? And it's interesting because the woods is like that for me. When I get out there, even if there's nothing going on and I get skunked, there's a connection that I feel, and it gives me a time where I run my own business too, like you, and it's 100 miles an hour all day long. I've got 4 kids. Most of them are grown now, but my life's pretty wild. And just having the time to actually slow down and be thankful, like that gives me that. And that's one of the biggest sources of peace and time that I've found with God is being out there. So I think that's awesome that you put that on your platform. I believe it too. I try to make sure I talk about it as well. And like you said, I don't want to, push it on anybody that doesn't want to buy it. But at the same time, I think it's our, responsibility to talk about that. So at least if people don't know God, they take the opportunity to think about it, and hopefully, if you make that kind of a difference in one person's life, like you said, at the end of the day, that's the Great Commission, right? That's what we're asked to do.
yeah, you've done your job.
Yeah, man. So to circle back, you're scouting. You basically made the decision. I got to go find another shooter. You're up. They're mostly in the CRP because all the treat areas have got tree stands and cameras hanging in them. So where are we at this point? You're scouting and take it from there.
So day one, I hang and glass. Not where I found him. The place before that, it was the first area, and man, most of the guys were seeing very minimal deer. Sit number one, I saw a good bit of deer. I didn't see a deer that I wanted to go after, but I knew I was, kind of, hey, I'm on the right track here. So I put
and were the other guys not seeing them because they were all just still looking in the same places?
Yeah.
Kind of deep. They were in the they were in the trees. They were going looking standard bedding areas. Yeah. They weren't looking in the right place essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I kind of was hearing what some guys were seeing, but I really don't know what everybody was doing. But that's the first time I sat trying to do kind of what I was doing, I saw close to 20 deer. So I was like, okay,
we're on the right track.
Yeah. So I put a couple sits into that place. Never saw a deer quite the caliber that I wanted to go hunt. So second place I went to.
What was your cutoff when you were saying, like, on that trip? What was the shooter for you?
I was going for my biggest deer.
Okay.
I left the
house. If it wasn't your biggest, you weren't shooting it, at least not until the last day.
I'd still have a tag. I wasn't.
You're gonna go. You're gonna eat the tag if you couldn't kill your biggest one. All right, I got respect for that, man.
Yeah, I've done it before, but I'm not a real big advocate on last day just shoot one. Just because, especially if it's September, I mean, you got till January.
Right. And you can get back up there. So you'll go back. Like if you wouldn't have found what you wanted, you would have gone back up there and hunted that same area later in the season, right? Yeah. Okay. So you're seeing a good amount of deer. You feel pretty good about where you're scouting. You sat that one a couple days.
Yeah. And then second area I wanted to try to watch, I hung, and at, I want to say 3:15, the deer I ended up killing's running buddy stood up, and he was very borderline. I mean, to be honest with you, had I not seen him, I probably would have ended up, pursuing that deer. He was probably 150 inches, just a big 9-point. And he was kind of standing up, laying down throughout the afternoon, just kind of feeding on some browse and whatnot. And at last light, this deer ends up standing up, and I was like, okay, we have something to lock in on.
I found him.
Yeah.
Huh? Did you give him are you a guy who names your deer or not? Did you name him?
I didn't name him. I am a guy that names my deer occasionally. If it's a deer I've got a lot of history with, and I've really spent some time with them, I'll kind of name them, especially around Alabama, because you got 8 points and you got 9 points and you got 10 points, but 90% of them are 8 points. So saying, the big 8, well, there's 15 of those. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I was calling this deer the 160. I called my dad and one of my buddies, and I was like, I found one. And I started saying, I said, he's going to be all over that 160 mark. And so from then on, every time I'd see him or talk about him, I'd just call him the 160. So
this section of the podcast is brought to you by Osseo Gear. With its one-of-a-kind Raptor camo pattern, Osseo blends seamlessly into the whitetail woods. Its features and technology are designed specifically for the unique needs of bow hunters. I ran Osseo this past season, and from the 100-degree temperatures of the South Carolina swamps to the teens of the Illinois rut, Osseo has a system that covers you in every temperature. With 30 years of bow hunting experience, Osseo is backed by a lifetime guarantee. Use the code DO NOTGO20 for 20% off the entire Osseo catalog. Find them at OsseoGear.com. All right, so we found our shooter, and you said you found him at last light, right?
Yeah.
At that. Okay. And what day is this at this point? Are we on day 6, day 7, something like that? Because I think you said you spent 9 days in your truck, at least on your Instagram
up
post.
until I killed him, it was 9 days. I ended up spending. Well, no, I ended up with somewhere to stay. Never mind. That was day 9, 8, 7. I guess 6.
Okay. So day 6, you catch him at daylight, and you catch him bedded or coming up out of his bed. So what's your strategy from there? You found your shooter, you found where he was bedding. Then what did you start thinking about how you're going to hunt him?
To be honest, I didn't at that point. I was like, I need to get eyes on this deer again. It's kind of the same reason I was looking for another shooter. Is I don't like to do anything without complete and utter confidence. I would rather take longer to watch an animal and figure out what's going on to go in and kill them quick, rather than find one or just go in there. Like I like to know I have a deer, I know what he's doing, and I can go in and kill him. I try to kind of stick to like a 3 hunt rule. I don't like to hunt one deer more than 3 times. I'm trying to figure out what he's doing and pick the right time to go in and get it done within like 3 sits, or at least 3 days. So that's kind of what I was doing with this deer.
So what'd you do next then?
Went back the next morning.
Same tree?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and tell you I didn't have to do much moving on this deer, because the way I set up, when I set up to glass, I set up to kill as well, but I want to be able to see them, like everything that I want to see. Seeing is overshooting, but I still want a chance.
Okay.
So there was a little water hole in this field that I set up on. And as I watched those deer the first day, I got to watch them, for 20 minutes. I said last light, but he stood up probably 20 minutes before last light. And also all the other deer I saw were kind of on like this, they had this loop that they were making. There was I guess you call it like a secondary food source, some kind of little hole in that CRP where there was just a different kind of plant growing that just was like a magnet that every deer was in and up there at some point in time. And then there was another place on the other kind of end of the field that they were going. And then every deer that I would end up seeing was coming and drinking this water. So I was like, okay, I'm not moving. I want to see day 2. Do these deer come to the water? Are all the deer still coming to the water? And I mean, yeah, it was the same kind of deal. It was like all these deer just had this loop. Now they may be making it clockwise, counterclockwise. They may go from point B to C to A or A to B to C, but they were all ending up in 1 of 3 places. And I glassed pretty much all day that second day and never saw those bucks. And then again at last light, they stood up, and it wasn't nowhere close to the same spot. They weren't using a specific bed. They were just using that bedding area. And in the daylight, it's kind of like they had that loop that they were making, like in the mornings, like right before daylight to first light. And then in the afternoons, last few minutes of daylight till right through last light. Then they go out into the crops. But it seemed like they were, and I could see some other bucks too. So I was kind of basing some stuff off of multiple deer, not just 1 or 2 bucks, but it seemed like all the bucks were kind of making that sort of loop and bedding down wherever they were when the sun came up. They didn't have specific beds. So I kind of was.
So you think do you think those 2 deer were in there before you got in there that day?
Yes.
Okay.
But I know for a fact they were, because they were bedded closer to me, and
gotcha.
I just never saw them. I guess they were probably laying down before before it got daylight. And the place where they laid down the second time where they came out of was a little bit thicker. It was kind of like a clump of thick stuff out in that field. So even if they were getting up and feeding, kind of like that his running buddy did throughout the day before, I wouldn't have seen them.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing to me how well these big animals can hide themselves.
Man.
Like, what an amazing job they do at being able to find sustenance, find water, do the things it takes to stay alive, and even though they're huge, not let you see them.
Yes. I mean,
it's insane.
And it's like those big deer just have like a sixth sense about them. I mean, even just watching them move and, do stuff, it's like every deer can do the same thing, and they just have a way of they're different. I mean, like that deer. So I'll say this kind of goes into that. So that second afternoon I saw them, and they stand up and are beelining it towards this water. Running buddy comes in and steps out at like 20 yards in a shooting lane. And at this point, I could not see the big deer, but I knew that he should be with him.
Yeah.
So
and so was there ever a thought? There was never a thought, right? Because you had pretty much decided you were going to shoot the 160. So the running buddy didn't even tempt you.
I mean, you got 150-inch public land deer standing at 25 yards. Yeah, it's a thought. You'd have to be crazy for it not to be. But
yeah, I don't think I'd have the discipline. Now, I haven't been doing as long as you, and I don't have as many on the wall as you do. So if I had a 150, I'd be like, let's go, baby.
Well, I only have one on the wall that is in the 150s. It's that one. That deer right there was 152. That was my biggest up to that point.
Was his running buddy bigger than the one you got on the wall?
Borderline. I mean, they were almost identical. Almost identical.
Yeah. So I understand what you're saying. You wanted to, you were holding out for the big dog.
Yeah.
And you had already made that decision.
Yeah. So. If I, no idea that the other deer's there, he just shows up. Yeah. I mean, I'm probably shooting him. It was tough because he had velvet hanging off one side. He was in full velvet on the other side. That's a
cool looking deer.
Hard pass.
Yeah.
But they actually had a couple other little small bucks with them that day, and literally every single deer walks right under me. Like, 15, 20 yards, wide open shooting lanes. And he was the last one to come in. And like we were saying, those big deer just do something different. I mean, every deer does the exact same thing. And he comes and stays 40 yards back, walks a completely different trail. I draw back on him. I end up having him at 30 yards. And the way he walked right out of a shooting lane. I never had a chance to shoot. All the other deer went to drink out of that little hole one way. He went the other way. He drank. He left.
How far was that? How far away from you was that hole? Was that water hole?
Closest point was like 30 yards. Farthest point, it was shaped kind of funny, but the farthest point was like 70. When he's drinking, he's at like 50, and then turns back. All the other deer are still hanging out. He turns back to go get back in the thick part of the thick stuff, and he comes through at 60. I drew back, and I couldn't see my pin good. I was like, okay, I'm on this deer. He's comfortable. He will be back here. I'm not taking a chance and shooting this deer at 60 yards when it's, last lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've had that situation before too. It's that's rough, man. When you got one that that is right there within, your skill set, and you can't pick up the pin.
Yeah.
Like that one.
I've had that happen more times. It's terrible. You just gotta watch them walk off.
Yeah. No, I had that happen last year with me on one, and it was first light, and he had been feeding underneath. Same thing. I was in a tree. He had been feeding underneath me for probably 30 minutes, when it was pitch black. And as the light came up, there was 3 different times I drew back on him, and I let down every one of them because I just couldn't pick it up. It was freaking miserable, man.
Yeah, it's rough. And if you bow hunt and, you stay on good deer enough, it's going to happen to you a whole lot more times than you squeeze that shot off. It feels like, especially if you're
Yeah.
like I love hunting the rut, but I feel like I kind of suck at the rut. Uh, like early season type stuff, man, that just seems so normal. Like every time.
Well, I mean, you just seem like you're so strategic about figuring out what they're doing. That's an early season thing, right? I
It
mean, the
is.
rut's a completely different animal.
Yeah, it is. I like killing those deer close to where they lay down, and uh, the rut's just so wild and random. I mean, I like having a deer, figuring him out, playing the game with him, and getting in and just outsmarting that deer. That's what my high comes from, is outsmarting a mature deer in his zone. And yeah, during the rut, it just seems impossible. But yeah, hunting them like that, you get beat a whole lot at last lot and first lot. If you try to hunt them in the mornings, I mean, it'll be, you know, 15 minutes before you can shoot, and they'll be standing in front of you. I mean, I've had it happen where they're standing in front of me working a scrape, and all I knew was a deer was hitting the scrape because I could hear him, and then pull the card, and there he is.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I had that same situation last year at first light, and the only thing I could see was his antlers because they were white. You know, I couldn't hardly see anything on him, but I knew he was a big deer, and there's a reason they stay alive. You know, they get out of there when they know it's time to get out of there.
Yeah.
So you pull back, you let down on him, and you're going to live to fight another day. So what's the next day look like?
So next day, I decided not to hunt that morning because I tried it the day before. I didn't see them. I knew they were probably laying down pretty early. I was like, they are bedding every time that I was set up on those deer. They were bedded within like 140 yards. Like they were bedding very close to me. So I was like, they're close. I'm not going to take a chance of bumping something in the daylight. Or before daylight, they're going to be here. They were bedded at like 140 day one. Day two, they were bedded at like 100. So I knew I was close enough to where I could kill them in the afternoons.
And how did you, but how did you find, like, what was your entry into that situation? Because you're getting pretty tight to them, to their bedding area. How were you getting in there?
So I wasn't real far off the road. People were
okay.
I'll also say this: in the time that I hunted this deer, I had 5 guys walk under my tree stand.
Did you really?
I mean, I was in a very high pressured place. Like,
did they know you were there? Did they even see you there?
Or a couple did.
Yeah. Okay.
Super high pressured area, very non-disturbed micro spot. Like guys everywhere around, but the deer were right here and people were walking by them. So I was walking in. I wasn't walking in the same way as everybody else because I was trying not to like bump the deer, getting to where I was trying to sit, but kind of walking not far from where everybody else was walking, where it was a little better for my wind and I wasn't going to be completely visible getting in there.
But you hunted the same tree, right?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Because I had my access was pretty bulletproof. I was walking pretty much through a field that a lot of people were using, a lot of deer weren't, and getting to a little tree row and popping up in a tree. I mean,
gotcha.
And the wind every day was, we had like
that's what I was about to ask you. Was the wind that consistent? You were able to...
I had like a 6-day stretch where the wind was perfect.
Nah.
So I knew it was a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. You weren't going to keep getting that every day.
Yes. But in those few days, I knew eventually I would have my chance as long as I did not screw it up. And, a lot of times I'm a little more aggressive than that, but you just got to be able, in those situations, you've got to be able to, look at what you got going on around you and calculate, do I need to get more aggressive or do I need to sit back and let it happen? And at that point, I was like, I'm not screwing these deer up. They're going to end up, doing it. So day 3, sorry, I kind of got off track, but Day,
No, I asked you. That was my question. I was asking the entry question. So that was about, I, that was interesting to me. So day three, you give it, you rest the morning,
yeah,
you go out, and you're going to hunt him in the afternoon because you didn't think you'd be able to beat him back to his bed.
yeah.
So,
It was hot. Uh, the deer were on the water hole, or I was hunting a water source, and I was like, okay,
mm-hmm,
I'm gonna get in here pretty early. Uh, so I actually went and got set up at about 12:45 and was gonna sit till dark. And
mm-hmm,
1:15, a doe comes in and drinks water in this hole, and when she goes to leave and go back to where she was wanting to lay down, she walks up on this deer. Like, I guess she didn't know he was there. Uh, and like pretty much runs into him. I mean, gets within 2 yards and he just stands up and looks at her, and he is at like 78 yards from where I'm sitting.
in a shooting lane.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was like, oh gosh. Like, I mean, because
What?
it's just like
78 yards on a white. So, like, I was gonna, and I know that the shot you took was a good shot. What's your kind of? Do you have a hard and fast rule on distance,
at that point
or is it?
I had drawn back on him twice. I told myself if he
Yeah.
got under 70 and that looked like my only chance, I was shooting him. Uh,
Okay.
but
So 78. He's just a little bit outside of where you want
yeah,
to,
and
where you're
it's so early
comfortable.
in the day. I wasn't just gonna, out of nowhere
Yeah.
just sling an arrow.
Mm-hmm.
So he stands up, the doe walks off, and he starts coming at me, real slow. I swear that deer wasn't walking 0.1 miles an hour. I mean, I've seen snails move faster than that.
That's so painful, dude. That's so painful.
He comes in to 70 on the dot and lays down again.
Oh
I'm
my
like, oh, you
gosh.
got to be kidding me. So probably lays down for 30 minutes and stands up again. And I was like, okay, game on. He's coming here. He's walking towards me, gets to 60 flat, and I was just going to let him, see how close he got. 60 yards, lays down.
And when he lays down, can you see him
I can
now
see his
as he lays
horns.
down?
I can see his horns.
You can see his horns.
Uh,
Okay.
and his running buddy is across this little hole, this little water hole. His running buddy ends up coming in while he's laying down at like 40 yards again, and then drinks water, goes back, lays down. And they're both laying there. He laid there for close to an hour on that sit, or when he bedded down that time. And finally stands up again, and he was walking dead at me. I mean, the way he was working was dead towards me. So I was like, I'm gonna try to let him get 30, like a good shot. And
Sure.
he stands up and just looks around, and his running buddy stands up across the pond, and he was probably 70 yards at this point, but the shooter's here and the running buddy's here. And when they were both standing up, the running buddy turned to go to that little food source in that field that those deer were eating on. And
Yeah.
when he did, the big deer turned, and I mean, he didn't start walking off, but he took a few steps and kind of just stood and was looking and watching that deer. And when I was just trying to like read his body language, see what he was going to do. And when I could tell he made the executive decision to follow that deer, I was like, okay, here's the time. So I drew back. He started trying to walk, and I stopped him. He was at 64, and I let her fly.
So you just stopped him with a
Just a meh,
meh,
meh.
six. So you took a 64-yard shot, and where'd you hit him?
So I hit him. He ducked it, and to be honest, at the time I was not sure where I hit him because he was in like chest tall stuff. The stuff he was in, pretty much just because he had laid down in it's the only reason I could even see his vitals. But it came up to his vitals, and he kind of ducked, and just at that far, I lost my arrow. I couldn't tell where it hit him, but I knew it sounded good. I hit him a little high, probably 6-7 inches higher than where you would aim, but I was probably close to 35 foot up in this tree, and it actually, I still don't know exactly how it happened, but it went in a little high and came out between his two front legs. Uh, Now,
Gotcha. Probably he probably turned a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. Now I didn't know that at the time. Which the recovery story is pretty nuts too. I mean, I'm panicking. I mean, I knew it was big. I mean, I wasn't panicking when I shot. Don't get me wrong there. But I just shot the biggest deer. I know the biggest deer of my life. I don't have any idea where the arrow hit. He went into some really thick stuff, and I lost him. So I give him like 2 hours, and I'm calling people because.
And it was what you shot him around what time? 1:30ish?
No, I saw him the first time at like.
Oh, okay. What time was the shot?
Like 3:05.
Okay, so you let him sit till about 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Get down, go check for blood, and he's dumping. And I was kind of wanting, just because I didn't know where exactly I hit him, I was like, I'm gonna just go find blood and back out a little bit. Well, there was blood everywhere.
Okay.
So I was like, this deer's probably dead. So I start trailing him, and I get into where he went into that real thick stuff, and I mean, it's just blood sprayed on stuff. So I was on the phone with my dad, and we were talking, and I was like, I'm gonna go get him. He should be dead. And now when I say thick stuff, I mean you can't see 5 yards in front of you. And so I start easing through, following blood, and I get to where I can see the deer. And he's laying on his side, legs out, head down. And I was like, okay, perfect. I get probably 5 steps from the deer, and he looks up at me and takes off running. Now, I can see the deer, so I have an arrow on my bow, release on, ready for something to happen, but I wasn't ready for him to take off quite that fast. So he takes off, I take off. Because that patch of thick stuff he was in wasn't very big. I knew I needed to stay on him and see what he did when he got kind of in the stuff I could see in a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he gets out of that patch, and I step out, and he is at 15 yards facing away from me, just standing there. I knew it was hurting because, I mean, even before I saw him, go in when I shot, he was like wobbling, and I mean, I thought he should be dead. Well, he's just standing there, so I draw back and shoot him. That shot ended up hitting kind of like that femoral artery by the tail, which not an ideal shot, but I've already shot him one good time. He's bleeding good. My objective is to get as many arrows in this deer at this point as I can. Just keep him bleeding, keep him, every shot makes him die a little faster.
Yeah.
So he kicks, runs 5 yards, gets in some tall stuff, and stops again. I said, all right, I'm not loading another arrow.
Let's knock another one.
And I can see like neck up. So I draw back, and he's at like 30 yards, and I just put it on his neck where I could see, and shot again. And I hit him kind of, top of the back, and it went through and come out the middle of his neck. And I didn't know it at the time because I backed out after he disappeared, but he only made it 10 yards past that shot. I mean, it was
lay down.
All 3 shots were lethal. One in his neck, which, I mean, would have killed him almost instantly in any circumstance. The second shot was at femoral artery, and I single lunged him on that first shot. Now, looking back at it, now that I know.
Tough son of a gun, man.
Them big deer, man, are different.
Those big deer are tough. They are.
Yep.
They're different.
Yeah. They do not like to die.
So you said you backed out after that third shot? How long did you let him sit before you went and checked
Another
him?
2 hours.
Really?
Yeah. I'd made some friends while I was there. Some local guys and some out-of-state guys. And one of my friends that I had made that lived around there, I told him that I'd shot a deer, and he told me he would come help me, towards last light. And he got down, and so when he got there about 7:00, me and him took off and went in there and found him, and he helped me get the deer out and stuff. And I actually, right before I went in to kill this deer, I was out getting ready, talking to the guy that helped me, get him out, and a a guy you may know who he is, Jackson Smith. He does some film stuff and whatnot for Midwest Whitetail. Pulls up and starts talking. We introduced ourselves and exchanged numbers, and he said, "Man," he said, "I got a good camera. If you if you shoot one, call me. I'll take pictures with it and stuff." So
So he's the one that took the
he's
photos?
the one that took the photos. Literally,
You got some good pictures, man.
yeah, they were really good. It was awesome. Literally 15 minutes before I take off walking into the woods, he pulls up and we get each other's number, and like, literally just a God thing, like making these friends that happen to help me and meeting him minutes before I go into the woods, and that's the time I kill, and have him to take the pictures, have a friend there to help me get the deer out, because none of that stuff would have been like really doable. It would have been doable, but it wouldn't have been easy by myself.
I mean, so what was it like when obviously you said this is the biggest one you've ever shot, right? So as you walk up on him, and obviously this is a long process from the time you get there to the time you're hunting this one deer, 4 days, and then you decide you're going to pivot, and then you scout, and now you finally shoot the biggest deer you've ever shot. What was that? How were you feeling as you walked up on him?
It's kind of like that post says, words can't even describe it, man.
Yeah.
I've hunted a long time, and I've spent a lot of time looking for, a deer of kind of that caliber. And man, it feels like, I mean, it's probably going to sound stupid, but like a lifetime of just giving it literally everything you have. Like that's the only thing I've cared about. I quit sports in high school to hunt deer. I have set my work, my, jobs throughout my whole life up to be able to hunt deer. And, I haven't had that like icebreaker, like really giant buck. I mean, I've killed some big deer in Alabama, but they can be as big as they want to be in Alabama. They're still 130.
Yeah. I was going to say South Carolina's the same way. They just don't get big.
Yeah. I mean, it was like just all that wrapping hands around them, just all hits at one time. And I don't know, man. It's there's not a way to describe that.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing story, brother. I appreciate you jumping on here this morning and talking to me about it. It's, I really want to be able to pick your brain and learn some stuff from you. I've got an area that I've been working down here and I'm trying to do, like a lot of the stuff that you're doing are things that I'm trying to learn how to do. So hopefully I can pick your brain offline about some of that stuff and get you to maybe look at an area for me. But that, I will tell you what, that story, like I've had moments like that in my life. They were focused around football and a lifetime of doing that kind of stuff. And I'm just starting, to make that journey in hunting.
Yeah.
But I understand that feeling, when you've poured every bit of yourself into something and that thing that you've been dreaming about forever, all of a sudden it happens, and it's years and years in the making. Yeah. Like I get that feeling. And, for people like us who are, men of faith, I know that a lot of that, as you sit back and reflect on it too, you give God a lot of that credit. But God also gave you the tenacity, the skill, all the things that it took for you to eventually get there. And so that comes back to you taking those gifts you've been given and putting them into place. So, man, I got to give you so much credit, and I'm so happy for you. That's awesome.
I sure do appreciate it. It means the world. It's still a weird feeling. It's still surreal. I mean, it's been 2 weeks, and I don't think I've wrapped my head around it.
Well, the good part about it, just speaking from somebody who's been there, is over time it loses some of its luster, but it's still like those moments in time, they kind of end up being a picture frame in your head. Yeah. And even if you kill a bigger one at some point, the way that you felt is never going to go away. You're always going to remember the way that felt.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you, man. Awesome work.
Yeah. Man,
awesome work.
Thank you. I sure do appreciate it and appreciate you having me on, and it's been a blast.
Yeah, I appreciate you getting on and talking to me. Thank you so much, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This section of the podcast is brought to you by Ridgeline Athlete. Don't let your physical preparation hold you back from finding success this season. You can train anytime, anywhere with a professional coach who brings decades of performance training and hunting experience to every session, and I think that is important. Ridgeline Athlete provides backcountry athletes with safe, highly effective training programs that are built for the demands of the backcountry. Use RA Do Not Go 30 to get 30% off any training program. You can find them at ridgelineathlete.com or hit up Adrian on Instagram at ridgelineathlete.